Hey guys, today I'm looking at Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker. I'm not sure if I'm like most people in this situation, but I definitely played all the mainline Metal Gear games, and this one was on the PSP, and eventually was actually ported to PS3, and I simply skipped it and had no interest in really playing it, and it looked like, okay, cool, it's, a big boss during the Cold War. And I think there was a lot of more interest generated on this game when 5 came out. And so, yeah, I guess like a lot of people, I'm just getting around to this now. Metal Gear is basically over and done. Whatever Konami does with the property or the IP is not going to be Metal Gear. I mean, they're trying to do a bunch of remakes and stuff, but we'll see what happens. But I don't have confidence that it's going to be of the same essence, essentially, unless it's a one-to-one remake. So, Peace Walker, how did I initially feel about it? It's okay. It's in that okay range. There's some things about it that are very, I don't know, frustrating, repetitive. You have to keep in mind that this is a portable mobile game, and really mobile games are designed for, you know, very close time limit. This is like for someone on their subway to their job in, corporate Japan, right? So they don't have like hours to spend. And the whole structure of the gameplay, some of it is definitely more traditional Metal Gear, where it's long ass cutscenes, stories, audio logs, etc. And then there's also the actual missions, and the actual missions of the whole game, the actual gameplay. It's very much structured. If you put all the levels back to back, if it was one gigantic level with no cutscenes or any mission briefing in between, it would be, probably shorter than Metal Gear Solid 1. Like, it's, there's a lot of padding here. So from the gameplay perspective, I wasn't really thrilled. I mean, there were some things I did like, kind of going to Metal Gear Solid 3 style gameplay was kind of nice, but it wasn't great. And again, there's a lot of padding, the whole mother base stuff. But the really good part of this game that I really, really enjoyed actually was the story, but not all the story. When you first start the game, it's very whatever. And for the most part, like the story is also, again, very whatever. Like, I don't care. There's, the basic premise is that there are, the CIA and the KGB have essentially infiltrated and are trying to control Central and South America in this region. And Snake, with his, big boss, Outer Heaven, Military Without Borders, it is kind of caught in between the superpowers. And so, as a mercenary group without rules or regulations, they still need to do business, and so they're kind of seeing who they can contract with either the KGB or the Americans. And so, of course, things escalate, nukes get involved, Metal Gear gets involved, and it's very much a larger commentary on the Cold War. And so that was kind of nice, but I just have to say, though, it was absolutely brutal where you unlock these briefing, conversations. And I thought, okay, how long could these be? And I think it was maybe the first one of Miller, and like it, or the first 3 or 4. I was sitting there for, non-exaggeration, an hour at least, listening to things about the Cold War culture, etc. And it's fine to do that, but I felt like I was getting a Netflix documentary or something. Like, it was just so much information that it was frankly crazy. But my favorite part of this game is actually at the end, where you kind of get more context on the events of Metal Gear Solid 3, the motivations of the boss, and that was honestly my favorite aspect of the game. But I'm going to talk about that, I think, later, just to cover some of the basics. So, I guess, from the gameplay standard, it's pretty much Metal Gear Solid 3. You have a full 3D environment that you can control the camera, so the isometric thing is gone, and in Subsistence of 3, which most people I think played, they're used to that full 3D control of the camera and whatnot. Sneaking missions are usually 2, 3, sometimes 4 areas. They're very, very short. And yeah, it really emphasizes you to, sneak around, use your tranquilizer quite a lot. And the other thing that really shocked me too is how similar this was to 5. I saw like a friend play it, and I thought, oh, that looks kind of similar to 5 with the base management and everything. But no, it's very, very much like 5 is basically a sequel to this game. And it's kind of interesting how why Kojima decided to go with this design. So the kind of prevailing thing that I've kind of come to terms with is that Kojima, after 4, he made Snake old. He's kind of said, "Oh, I don't want to make this series anymore. I want to go do something else," but he's contractually obligated by Konami to make X amount of games. And so 5 was kind of like the handoff point, where it was like half Konami, half a Kojima game. And as we all know, his name was stripped off of 5. And, despite his name being in the opening credits of every single submission, but it kind of shows the animosity between the two people. And I think it won Game of the Year or some kind of award at the Game Awards, and he was not there to accept it because Konami barred him. And it was just really, like, very scummy. And so there's a lot of tension. And so, there's kind of this backhandedness where, Kojima, I feel, went to his least liked creation, or something that was super tedious or corporate or whatever, to base 5 after this. So really this is a story of Peace Walker and 5. And so from a gameplay perspective, yeah, you have things like mother-based management, and like they have all these things and stats about the mess hall and the repair bay and the combat squad and all this stuff, and then you deploy men to the field and you get this like little kind of Assassin's Creed style turn, not even turn-based, it's like auto-based combat. It's kind of like RNG. It's basically RNG more or less. You just have to have really good stats on your guys in order to win. You have no control over who does what. And you just kind of watch this thing unfold, and there's nothing you can do. And so there's that. There's also recruiting new guys. There's a large multiplayer aspect about, recruiting people, trading people, invading other players' bases, invading, I don't know, what else, sort of like side missions. Oh, there's co-op missions. So it kind of felt like the Four Swords of the Metal Gear series in a funny, weird way, because it was like, okay, these are all the like the little fun multiplayer aspects of the game that we've tried to highlight here in this portable game. And so portable games, they're fun, they're nice, but they're supposed to be kind of inferior versions of their console components. And that's more or less what we have here. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say it's inferior, because really it's just Metal Gear Solid 3 ported onto the system. Just the design and the features, there's just so many of these things that just, again, they're designed to kind of waste your time. All of these things with, so the base management thing, so they have all these stats, but everything I just do is I do auto-assign, and auto-assign 90% of the time gets me the results I automatically want. So you could do this whole base management, hiring people, moving people, firing people to R&D, but like what the player honestly does at the end of the day is, they just they just do auto-assign, and they don't bother with all that, because it solves itself, and it's like an unnecessary mechanic or gimmick that they created, and they brought it into 5 again to, waste time or create this experience where, it was more about the player spending more time with a single game as if it's their entire world, rather than having a short, focused, interesting experience. And I think that kind of leads me to realize that 5, in its design philosophy, in its incorporation of the kind of more portable or time-wasting aspects of this game, this made me realize 5 really is a Konami game. And in the style that it has a much darker theme, it's much more quote-unquote mature, more, just dark and unnecessary in a lot of ways. And there's so many times you have to replay all these missions, and in a non-dynamic manner. Like, I don't mind a game. I honestly didn't mind Ground Zeroes, because I knew it was a demo. I knew it wasn't a full game, and I knew it was like this little thing that they just added to, scummily to get money. But I kind of appreciated it because it brought me back to the old days of games like, I don't know, something like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, of all things, where you have a small environment, you kind of have a time limit. And so you get like, 5 to 10 minutes to explore this environment and like try to do all the things. And each time you do it in a rogue setting, you get better at it, or you find new things that you can, unlock almost. I mean, they don't carry over, but it's kind of like a fun little mini game in a way. It's a very small focused thing. And so even though you're doing the base multiple times over, you can do it as many times as you want, so you can find all the little secrets, little hidden Easter eggs, and it's very much in scope, I think. And when you're playing 5, the problem is that you don't know where the scope is. So 5's issue is like, well, you're doing the exact same thing, and like on paper it sounds good. It's like, okay, we're going to play the same base or mission over and over and over again. Oh, but there's no multiple bases now, and there's also an open world, and you're going to replay some of the same bases, but now they're going to have things like, tanks in it, or some special side objective, or you have to do, tranquilizer. And, mechanically, 5 is an amazing game, but the story is abysmal. It's dark, it's incoherent, and the big reveal about who Venom and Snake is so... such a letdown, because it basically says nothing really matters in the events of this game. Nothing that you do matters. Nothing that the characters do matters. And on top of that, the whole, I don't know, the whole setup or the vibe of 5 is that it forces you to keep replaying these base missions. So for Ground Zeroes, I did replay that base mission maybe 10 times, in different kind of sub things and sub, categories and whatever. But here's the thing, the game doesn't force you to do that. To get the full story, you just need to beat it once, and then you go back and find all the other things. The problem with 5 is that it makes you replay basically the same areas over and over and over again, and you don't know when it's going to end. And so by the time you get to the end of the game, it's forced you to play all these things to the point where the player is kind of fed up. Yes, they give you all this variety and stuff, but it feels like you're not really free to use it, because it's not optional for you to do these missions. They're all mandatory, and there's like 50 of them that just, again, recycle a lot of the same locations. And yes, they have 2 different maps, South Africa and Afghanistan, but still, it just feels like so much gameplay. There's still long ass cutscenes, but they're not saying anything. It's like there's Skullface, and he's angry at the Anglosphere and developing the English-based virus because his country is bombed, and that's all we know about him. He's just angry. And then you have not Volgan and not Psycho Mantis, who is apparently like a girl Psycho Mantis, like his daughter or something. But I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. And then you have things like Eli. So Liquid Snake. So that's the one thing that I did kind of enjoy, but also doesn't make any sense in this game. Sorry, in 5. I'm sorry I'm getting sidetracked, but 5 is so similar to a lot of concepts in here. And so, bringing in Liquid Snake, it just made me realize, okay, wait, hold on. This kid's in Liberia. And I'm like, wait, no, Raiden's in Liberia. This is South Africa. What is Eli doing here? And you realize, like, oh, well, Eli was part of L'Enfance Terrible. So you're telling me like the child clone of the most important person in the world escaped a secret government program and ended up as a child soldier in South Africa? Like, I simply don't believe that. And then a cutscene, he just escapes with Philanthropist and is just never heard of again. I just felt like Kojima, there's like a lot of bitterness in 5, and it made me realize it's just a side of Kojima that he wanted to say F you to Konami, and Konami wanted to make... He's like, oh, we're going to make a gameplay-focused game without any, story or whatever, or focus on the things you usually do. And Kojima's like, fine, I'm going to do it so much that the player gets sick of it. And, yeah. And so that's kind of, this is Kojima's, creation, but again, it's supposed to be an inferior version of Metal Gear. And I think it's so funny that 5 kind of is on that same thing, that it emphasized the bad aspects of the Metal Gear series. But anyway... some things I do like about the gameplay in this game, and I swear this wasn't in the other ones, but so when you engage someone on the battlefield, you can grab them using CQC and throw them aside and knock them out. You can use your tranquilizer dart and basically shoot them and make them fall asleep, or you can kill them using your knife or whatever. In this one, if you sneak up on someone and you hold them up, they'll get down on the ground and they will not get up no matter what. And I got into this, the meta of the game, this one neat trick where you can go at full crouching speed, and as long as you tap the hold up button with your gun and aim at them, they will just immediately go to the ground and they will not get up for the rest of the match. So it's better than making them fall asleep, because eventually they do wake up. It's very unlikely. And if you stun them, again, it's pretty likely that they will wake up eventually, unless you use the actually stun pad and make them electrocuted, then they have 5 stars. So the whole structure, like that mechanic is actually really great, because it rewards you for sneaking up on guys and just tapping them like that. Well, it's much more risky to do it from a distance and otherwise, so that kind of makes it more balanced. And I swear in 3, if you did that, the enemy, even though you subdued them, even if you held them at gunpoint, if you let down your guard, they would end up moving their hands down and running away or attacking you, or say they're under attack and something like that. So I guess that's one thing I liked. I also liked the fact that the boxes had more mechanics in this game. Basically, you could lay them down on the ground and the enemy would come up to it and they would kick it, and there would be a variety of different effects from stun, bomb, etc. I thought that was cool. Again, you have the whole sort of mercenary outfit thing, so you constantly have, managing GMP, spending money on things, and of course it takes time to build things, so you feel impelled to buy things or research things you don't actually need, simply because it'll take time to do it. And then some of these upgrades are just make no sense. It's like you can spend 20,000 on the next upgrade for your pistol, so it has a slightly increased magazine capacity, or it's not very clear what it does. Or you can spend 25,000 on a brand new weapon. It's like, it's kind of a no-brainer, and it's the same thing in 5. I also really hate how the mission structure is set up. So very similar to the whole Mother Base synopsis or setup in 5. So you have Mother Base, you have your base management, but then you have your dispatch, and so you choose essentially a series of missions from a mission list, and for each mission you have to listen to the briefing. And there's sometimes, I didn't realize this until later, but there's like specific briefing notes for that specific mission, and so you have to listen and make sure you check the briefing, because Amanda or Miller or whoever is going to have some kind of unique voice dialogue. So it's like, okay, we gotta listen to this, and then you have to prep, and then it kind of doesn't tell you, but you kind of understand how each costume or suit or type of suit has a different dedicated loadout. So if you choose the naked loadout versus the sneaking suit versus the battle suit versus the normal suits, each one of them carries over the equipment. So I mean, there's that, which is kind of nice, I guess, because the battle suit, you're going to keep using the same weapons most likely. But it really breaks up the pacing, because a lot of the times, these things are, I know because of the way it was built, because it was on a mobile device, but you would do a mission and it would show the cutscene for like the boss you're about to fight, and in normal Metal Gear style, they would have a cutscene and the thing would start. But no, it says, it fades to white and it says to be continued in the next mission. So you have to get out of that cutscene, have a debriefing, check Mother Base, go back into the menu, click on the next mission, check the debriefing again for the next mission, and then start the mission and have another cutscene, and then the boss fight starts. So the amount of cutscenes and like, I know it's a Kojima game, but the amount of cutscenes and things like that is just frankly just super obnoxious, I guess, because in like just it was just gameplay. Like I said, this game back to back might be 2 hours worth of gameplay, but instead it's stretched out by the cutscenes and dialogue to 20 hours. And it's not bad, but that ratio is really painful. It's like 20% gameplay, 80% cutscenes and other things in management. Maybe not that bad. Maybe it's like 70% gameplay or 70% cutscenes. But yeah, it's just so much. It is interesting though how they did the camo system rather than in 3 where you're constantly changing it on the fly in the menu. You can only do it before the mission, and so that's in a way more frustrating, because there's this one mission where I had this specific camo that was meant for the ruins, and it was the mission at the ruins. But the first two areas leading up to the ruins were based on, what were they based on? They were based on like the jungle area, so they're more greens and stuff. And my camo index was not as high as in the other areas. I was starting to wonder, is this even worth it? You know, there are some really interesting weapons in this game. I mean, similar to 3, I guess. You know, you have a higher arsenal because you are a mercenary, so you have like machine guns, rocket launchers. You can not really customize them, but upgrade them. You can do other things like researching smoke grenades, chaff grenades, a bunch of interesting, weird gadgets and gizmos that sometimes come in handy and sometimes don't. For example, like a sound sensor or like a sonic eye, which what does it do? It says it makes indicators on sound based on where you are in the environment. And of course, this is the game that features the Fulton recovery system, and that was actually pretty cool that it was in this. I didn't realize that. I thought it was pretty nifty. The one thing that made it a little bit frustrating that they fortunately fixed in 5 is that as soon as you go up to someone, you can just Fulton them. While here, it's an equipable sub weapon, so you have to keep switching to it every time you want to distract someone, and it's honestly it's super annoying sometimes. But yeah, this is interesting as someone who played 5 first. You kind of get the backstory of who is Chico, who is Paz, and it's again everything is very different about these characters. Everything from how they look to how they act, and in 5, I just remember saying, okay, there's this little girl who gets her stomach operated on. They plant a bomb in her, and then she blows up the helicopter unbeknownst to her. And I'm like, Jesus, who are these people? And what did they deserve this? And it's no, they don't. And you look at, they're characterized in here, they're just kids. And again, Konami and Kojima, Metal Gear Solid 5 is a hate game. The Phantom Pain is just filled with hatred, and it's just so funny that the amount of story and tone that I got from 5, I got more from the trailers and the demos and the hype and the media around it than actually playing the game. The game was just mostly gameplay with very little story. You had freaking Quiet, who okay, she's quiet, she she doesn't talk, and there's a theme with the speaking of the language, and there's some convoluted thing that they we're trying to express with that, but it really didn't come across. But yeah, so you have Chico and Paz, and you get to know them. Chico's kind of into UMAs, or unidentified monster sightings, or something, like the Loch Ness Monster. Paz is all about peace, and she's kind of a boring character, I'll be honest. I mean, but she's kind of supposed to be in a weird way. She's supposed to be this student from Colombia or Nicaragua or something. The game takes place in Costa Rica mostly, and then a little bit of Nicaragua, but mostly Costa Rica. And it's about the whole, again, geopolitics of, Cuba, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the history of American-Cuban occupation, the KGB, the Soviets, what is a true deterrent. And that kind of really cool stuff doesn't really happen until the end of the story. So as I was playing through the game, I thought, this is really not good. There's a lot of dialogue that I don't really appreciate, and a lot of story I don't like, and just the gameplay doesn't justify it, really. Kojima definitely is more so someone wanting to tell a movie and a story, and then gameplay second. But that being said, once it got near the end, I actually really started to enjoy the story a lot more, and it did honestly get better. It really got into the mechanics of deterrence, and the whole aspect around Peace Walker is that it is a Metal Gear type system that, of course, they copied from the Shagohod, which is Huey Emmerich. And I think it's funny too, sorry, in the audio logs that they talk about 2001 Space Odyssey a lot. And he says, Hal sounds like a good name. And I always thought, oh yeah, Hal Emmerich, what if he was named after Hal? And pretty much Kojima confirms it that in here that he's named after the evil AI from 2001. But yeah, the whole idea around Peace Walker as a system, it's a Metal Gear, it's, launches nukes, but it's specifically designed to only launch retaliatory nukes. And so the whole concept is that, yes, you have detente, yes, you have this state where of mad, where the Soviets and the Americans understand that they will be mutually assured destruction if they actually participate in nuclear warfare, which is why they don't actually ever do it. On the other side, it's that I can't believe this villain's name. Hot Cold Man. Yep, that's his name. Basically, the idea of Peace Walker is that even if there was a nuclear strike launched at the United States or the Soviet Union, would they actually have the ability or the human capacity to launch a retaliatory strike? And his concept was that no, the humans, they know that if they launch their nukes, then more nukes will be launched, and that will result in complete and total devastation of the entire, civilized world and the globe itself. And so the idea behind Peace Walker is that it's a nuclear strike defense system modeled around an AI. And so the idea is that this half machine, half human thing with this first AI, which is modeled off the boss, by the way, is the only way to ensure that the nukes will actually strike retaliatorily, that you don't have to depend on the president or the vice president. And that would scare the hell out of the Soviets or the Americans, because then they know if they actually do launch a real nuke, that there is no question that there will be a retaliatory nuke. There is no decision making because the AI has already made the decision to retaliate. And in that scenario, that would actually cause real deterrence and real peace, in his view, because it's all betting on the human aspect of the leaders, and to leave the fate of the world in a few men's hands rather than an actual system that promises total, actual mad, mutually assured destruction is the only way to secure real peace and real harmony in the world. And so this is his goal, really. And so it's actually really super interesting once he reveals it. Again, a lot of the rest of the story is about, Nicaragua, the CIA's involvement, which is all pretty much accurate, kind of deification of Che Guevara, history of other kind of figures of the time, and the geopolitics, pretty much everything I've covered. So Peace Walker is actually a pretty interesting concept, even compared to the other Metal Gear games. So, and also Snake's mission to create a true society, or a world without a place for soldiers, without law, not laws, but without nationalities or identities, a place where people can truly be free, is also a pretty interesting concept. And you just see more of it here on what the idea of outer heaven really is. It's also funny that a lot of the story is told in these comic book style things where they kind of make them move, and so kind of like what AI does to a manga. And they're mostly okay. I kind of actually really dig this style, even though it feels a little bit cheap and a little bit cheesy at times when he's on a horse. But what's really funny is in these comic cutscenes, they have, there's no in-game cutscenes really, very few of them, but they really have they have QTEs in them, and so you have to do some of these things which are pretty funny. But yeah. But yeah, Paz is basically just about peace, and they talk about how Kazuhiro Miller, also Kazuhiro means peace. And so, yeah, she's just a girl, right? She's just I want everyone to get along, for there to be peace. She's a very nothing character, honestly. She's in a way, she's kind of realistic, because she's just kind of a dumb girl, frankly, who wants peace, and she's used a bargaining chip between a hostage by the KGB against Snake and whatever. There's also other characters like Amanda, Chico, who I've mentioned, Dr. Strangelove, who, again, very obviously based on the movie of the same name, who helped develop the AI, and is some lesbian woman, scientist. You have Huey Emmerich. And you also have Cecile, the ornithologist. So that's the one thing I retained from this game, is that ornithology is the study of birds, and you just find this random French woman who came to the island to study birds, and just Snake finds her almost half naked in the forest, and she's just there because Kojima wanted a hot French woman in his game. There's no other reason for her to be here. And it's funny too because she somewhat ties in here where there's one mission where you have to find what was it, like a key card that a guard took, and you need to find him using by identifying the bird call of the Quetzal, and so you have to like listen to Cecile's bird calls and figure out where he is and where the bird is, and I just found him anyway just because he's wearing a friggin' orange vest, so it was not hard to find him. I didn't even listen to the bird calls. So yeah, she ties in a little bit. She kind of has a reason to be there, but I think it's justified because some of the coda calls are honestly really funny in this game. There's one where she talks about French culture. I think the favorite one is she gets drunk on wine. Miller is trying to romance her all the time, and he always says the wrong things, where he's like, oh, so macarons are actually from Italy and not France. And she's like, I have had it with you, Mr. Miller. So, despite her being there for the pleasure of the creator and just as a fun character, she actually is at least fun in that sense. I actually like her more than Paz, frankly, who is kind of the image and the idea and she feels like the front cover of Peace Walker, and she has almost less involvement and less interesting things to say about the story, and she's in a way like less of a character than this friggin' random French woman who loves bad wine, or rather hates bad wine but drinks it anyway. But yeah, she feels like a real person at least. Strangelove is also interesting. There's her sexuality is like part of her character, but again, it's not a huge thing. But it does make sense because she brings up things like Alan Turing and the fact he was executed for his, well, not executed, castrated, and then killed himself for his homosexuality. After post Second World War, because despite building the Enigma machine. And so it kind of has a little bit of a point, and I do like how Metal Gear is able to talk about political situations and engagements without being propagandized or actionable on it, if that makes any sense. It kind of takes it, neutrally and just, treats it whatever. I think apparently Che Guevara was actually a pretty not good, not nice person, and not very, was not going to go down well in the history books, but was kind of trendy and popular at the time, and he kind of treats him with the same kind of pop cultural reference reverence that you might expect, which is, fine. Again, sneaking this game feels pretty good, applying the right pressure to the stick. I don't really have any real complaints about the gameplay. I've always been super frustrated by Metal Gear Solid gameplay, though, simply because over the years, you would just, Snake would never do exactly what I wanted him to do. You get stuck up against a wall, or he'd run up against something and climb something, what I meant for him to push himself against the wall. Here, now you press the action button to actually push yourself against the wall, which I think works a lot better than accidentally going around it. I've never felt Metal Gear, honestly, to be a very intuitive game or well-built game, but it's always been very interesting. And it always feels like as soon as I'm getting the hang of a certain mechanic or the way the game expects me to play, there's like a million cutscenes that interrupt me, and I get out of the gameplay and I kind of lose my mojo, which I think aggravates a lot of people. But again, if you tell a really good story, then it's worth it. And here, it's really not a great story for the first half, but it gets much better in the second half, really. It is kind of cool that you get a little bit more backstory on Big Boss, on how he met Miller in Colombia, I believe. How he was on the pro government side and he was on the anti-government side, and how they were both fighting proxy wars, and they decided just, well, screw this, let's team up and do this together, kind of thing. The CQC feels pretty good. I don't know, I feel this is really a Metal Gear Solid 3.5. There's like a little bit extendedness of the gameplay, kind of like touch-ups here and there, and as the fan favorite, I think that's a pretty great idea and way to go about it. But on that point, though, something I really need to bring up, and maybe it's this far into the review, but I really need to say it, is that I think if you do I recommend this game? Not, I mean, maybe. I would say this. If you are a fan of Snake Eater, I highly, highly recommend this game. Specifically Snake Eater. If you're not a fan of Snake Eater, then don't bother. Because, why do I say that? Because a lot of people praise Snake Eater for its story, its emotional thing, connection with the boss. And it just never landed for me. And I just thought, am I stupid? Am I not getting it? And I don't know if maybe I just played the games much later when then after they came out, maybe like a few like 5 or so years after. But from my perspective, like Peace Walker has a lot of the missing puzzle pieces about the boss, her relationship to Snake, her relationship to the government, and the whole overarching story. And I felt like, even though some of it was in codec calls near the end of the game and recordings, I felt like I really fully understood the full version and this true story of the boss. And really, this game is also very much about the boss and her kind of legacy and her motivations and why she did what she did. In Metal Gear Solid 3, they just keep pounding home she's a patriot, she did it for her country, and then also paradoxically say, well, she did it for the world because she saw the world from space and saw it united, and that's how she wanted the world to be as one. And then also saying, well, no, she only cared about the United States. She died for her country and she's a patriot. And these two things seem to be at odds. And in this game, it goes into more detail about her backstory. And it's kind of this weird thing where, like, I hate it when I have to read a wiki of a game after I've beaten it to get the full emotional breadth and depth of it. But here I'm getting it from the half sequel itself, that the great story is there, but it's effing told horribly, discontentedly. It's like the game has been disassembled, like the way the boss disassembles your firearms in the final fight and scattered around the battlefield, and it needs to be reassembled. And so when you really look at the boss's life in full, it reflects Snake's life, Solid Snake's life and Big Boss's life very much, where they are a bunch of soldiers that are tools in a machine. They are cogs in the war machine of the military-industrial complex. They are the flesh part of the Metal Gear. And in that sense that they are seen as cogs, they are used as cogs of war. And, it's really the struggle and the fight for identity versus duty. That, okay, yeah, the boss did her duty for her country, but that isn't who she was. And these two things are at opposite ends of the spectrum. And again, I'm just thinking through what happened, what actually happened to the boss, and what they don't really show, but what they do tell, which is that, okay, so the boss is a World War II war hero for the Americans. She is regarded as, this great savior, great, how triumph, whatever, victory, a sign of American culture. And in the post-war period, they basically, even before that, I think she gives birth on a battlefield to, her child, Ocelot, with the sorrow. The Russian patriots basically kidnap this child, like Olga, hold it captive in ransom, and so they make her basically follow her bidding. And it's unclear if they're working with the American patriots or philosophers on this side as well. So there's one thing, she's lost her child, and then there's some like side mission where she's sent on by the Russian patriots or someone, where, similar to Metal Gear Solid 3, they were in a situation where she had to kill a target, or the target had to kill her, and turns out the target is her husband or the father of her child, the Sorrow, and he basically offers no resistance and he lets her kill him, but it's only because they've been forced into this situation where she has to do it, otherwise they will do something to their child. So the only reason she's doing this is for her child, and because the husband understands, he allows her to kill him. And so then after this, what occurs is, she goes back to whatever she has to do, and she basically is, understandably fed up with being a tool for the government. And then it makes sense how Big Boss, or rather Naked Snake, becomes the kind of replacement for her child, her adopted son. And even then, they're both tools of war. And so she basically, I guess, after she has to kill the Sorrow, she, I guess, defects to the Soviet Union to get, she said, I've had enough of this. And, she has, and then she had her space flight program where she was the first woman in space. And, but they couldn't beat the Soviets in the space race. And she saw the Earth, but again, she was stripped because it was too embarrassing that the Americans had fumbled it only by a few hours, and it had failed to, come into reentry, and all these things failed in the mission that made America look really behind the Russians. And so they just said, well, you didn't even happen, you didn't even exist. And so she basically became just removable. She was just another asset, another cog in the machine that they just stripped from the record for their own reputation. And so then at a certain point, she goes and defects the Soviet Union. And then Volgin takes, with a couple of nuclear warheads. And so she defects. And like when you're playing Metal Gear Solid 3, you have no idea why she does this or why it makes any sense. But with all this context, it makes total sense that they used her. They destroyed her. And they took everything away from her and did not care and called her a war hero one day and then a failed astronaut that's not worthy of even being put in the news the next. And so she's like, there is no true enemy. And that's what she, like, she has, there's these two parts of her personality where there's what people see her as and who she truly is. And the game, Metal Gear Solid 3, is so poor and inconsistent in communicating this and hypocritical about it, where she's a patriot to her country that everyone adores, but she's also someone who died for the reason of uniting the world and stopping nuclear war and the destruction. So she defects the Soviet Union. Volgin takes the nukes, test fires it. She has to take the blame for it. And a lot more in this game, the AI of the boss, when they're being interrogated by Strangelove, she just says over and over again, what was the reason for your mission? She just says, kill me. And so there's this side of the boss that I never saw before, which is that she's actually very suicidal. She wants to die because everything that she loves has been taken from her. Her reputation, her dignity, her son, her lover, and she's just a tool. And she's not even a person to them. They've taken everything from her and just molded her to wherever they wanted to be. And again, this is the core thing about Metal Gear Solid is that you have to be an individual and you have to live, and don't let others and the society and the cogs of the machine define you, and to rebel against the power structures and the patriots and whatever, and allow yourself to fully be free and be yourself and live. Because when you have allowed yourself to become this prostitute of death, this mercenary of destruction, you have endured the unendurable and you want to die. And the message on living is so much more sense and so much more reasonable when you put it in contrast to a person who is very suicidal, where they will actually kill themselves because of the terrors that they've lived through and the indignities. And so the boss for me really came to life, even though it was an AI and them reminiscing and telling stories about her. It's almost better than her being in the game because you get this image of her that is very different. And I like to think it'd be so interesting and it'd be so easy to fix 3 in a story context where all you would have to do is show flashbacks to the boss and how she was different, how she was a different person, treated Snake well. And this whole emotional thing of like, oh well, she was so close to the boss. All you see them do in Metal Gear Solid 3 is that she beats the crap out of Snake like every other character in the game. And it's not like she takes the bullet for his eyeball. He does it for her. And you have no context to see why he's doing this, why he's simping for this older blonde woman who's his half mother, half lover figure. And it makes so much sense because it feels like all this writing and context was left out of 3. And all you'd have to do is show a flashback or a scene where she sees Snake as her real son, and she's willing to kill for him, but she's also willing to die for him, and he's willing to die for her. And that is like, that's it. That is the only context you would need to have that her death be emotional in 3, because you're just told she's a mentor, you're told that she's Snake's maternal figure, but you never actually see that. And here again, we don't see that, but we're told all the context that now makes sense. So it's not like we even saw or heard how this emotional complex relationship works. We had nothing, literally nothing. And at least in Peace Walker, we get more context. We get at least the hearsay of why she was so important and why that relationship worked. And I'm actually so motivated and so interested now in this series and in the character of the boss. I mean, there's very few characters like this, or even female characters like this. One of them is like Kreia, who is a woman who isn't totally masculine, but she has this bitter wisdom about her that she's been through so much, and instead of being spiteful about it, she is basically borderline suicidal, but yet idealistic at the same time. She has these ideals and this visions for this world that she wants, and it almost feels like she's a real person, and the game did a disservice describing her. So when I think about who the boss really was, it was someone who suffered their whole life, and basically she saw that this final mission that she went on, that she had to be assassinated by Snake, and maybe she also went to the Soviet Union to find her kidnapped son, who is Ocelot. I think it'd be really cool if they had a scene where she kind of sees him and she thinks she recognizes him, but she's not sure, and she never gets the chance to really find out, because she never actually finds out in the game. In fact, I don't think they even they do meet. They're in the same room when Snake is being tortured, and there's no implicitness in that scene. There's nothing hidden. There's just, I think it's very by the book, and I really wish that it wasn't that like that, because there's a much better story of Metal Gear Solid 3 that is not being told, and it's driving me kind of crazy. The other thing they would do is the final end scene. Like, that is a very beautiful scene. It's very romantic, very interesting. The colors, the arrangements of the flowers, and everything turns red. And it's just missing the story, the gravitas of that situation. It's just like, well, why do we care? And you realize that this person wants to die. They want to die, but it's not just that their death is meaningless, but in their death, they're not only achieving, okay, yeah, she's a patriot, blah, 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 but that's from the American side. What she's achieving is a way to defuse this nuclear tension between the Russians and the Americans. And she's also essentially dying to what I would say is transfer her trauma and her life into Snake. And what's also very interesting in Peace Walker, and I wish they would explain this, but they don't, is that Snake also has a giant snake tattoo over his stomach, like the boss. And that makes sense because she had a cesarean section on the battlefield, and there was, a snake-based thing. It's like, okay, and it's like slithering going through my body, blah, blah, blah. But why would Snake do the exact same scar on his own body? And it's a plot point in the game, because that scar on his body has metal wire in it, and he uses that to escape from prison. So it's like, it's somewhat important, I guess. But yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's just super, I don't know, bizarre to me, but it's just, there's just so much of the boss that we don't understand and is displayed in this game, and it brings her character to life. And so who she really was is, yeah, she's dying for world peace, and she's dying to make the world one, but she's also dying to give Snake the exact same experience that she had, where she was forced to kill and shoot someone she loved for her mission. And that's what she says. Where is your duty? Is it to your nation or yourself? Are you going to kill me, or are you going to do whatever? And so at first it looks like she's trying to make you realize that, you have to do the impossible and kill me in order to complete your mission and become a patriot. and no matter what, essentially. But I think it's more nuanced than that. I think she wants to either you spare my life and you join me, but you can't, because you have to do the impossible for world peace. But she also is saying, this is what I had to go through. You are reliving what I had to relive. You are doing what I had to do, and now you understand why I am doing what I'm doing, is that we're just tools of the government. We have been treated inhumanely, and now it's time to I wouldn't say get revenge, but it's time for you to understand that you can't escape these people, and I want to escape. And it just shows him the full breadth of what she went through. She basically transferred her ideology and her passion and her destiny into Snake at that point, into Big Boss. And then it makes sense why he starts MSF. Then it makes sense why he defects and goes from America. And I think what would have been better, they say, oh, she'll be a traitor of the West and the East. But I think what they should have done in that final scene where Snake is shaking or refusing to shake the hands of one of the directors is he'll say, oh, good thing that traitor's going to burn in hell or something. And then he doesn't shake his hand, because I always thought, oh, Snake was rude in that scene. But no, like, they hate her. They used her, and now they're all smiling smugly while they give you a medal for killing their liability, basically, and making her go away. And so with all this added context, it's a lot darker and a lot more cynical, where you kind of begin to radicalize and hate the government. But that's pretty much the reason why Snake starts MSF. So he basically treats the boss as a true patriot, not to the United States, but to the world. He sees her as someone who's willing to fill her mission, but her mission isn't about the Americans or the Russians or the Patriots. It's against the Patriots, and it's for world peace. And I just don't think that's very well communicated in that scene. And, Snake, he has the sadness of this loss and the ability to take on the role of the boss, but there's also the missing bitterness and resentment and the darkness that comes over him that turns him into the villain that is Big Boss, who really is, the good guy of the series, if you really think about it. And yeah, like that's an amazing, more emotionally interesting and charged story that we're just not told very well. And, if I were to thinking, I thought if I go back into Metal Gear Solid 3 and I said, why don't we add some more cutscenes here to add this context? I realized, oh God, no, there's already enough cutscenes as it is anyway. And so by the nature of its own structure and creation, that you need to have a good gameplay to cutscene ratio. Like, the most I would do is that at least, for each boss fight, you'd have a flashback of who the boss was, more context, maybe cutting out some scenes, but you'd have to change the whole structure of the game in order to really do that. Maybe add new levels, but yeah, no, I realize that there's so much context and so much story here, and to actually fit it in the game is actually difficult, and really, and you'd have to sacrifice some semblance, but this story is so amazing and so well told, and I wish that people could see this. And that's why I think Peace Walker is so important. That this is, I don't think Metal Gear Solid 3.5, I think it's 2.5, I think, or 3, no, I guess, yeah, 3.5. Like, you need this is the other half of the equation. You just need to put it together a little bit. I think it was also super emotional, where at the end you have the boss's AI, where it loses its its brain, essentially, but its heart or something reactivates. And like, it's a very emotional scene. Like, the ending to this game is actually really intense, where they have a Peace Walker is basically, I mean, okay, no, there's a million things that happen. There's like a quadruple cross where the CIA, basically uses Peace Walker to send, what was it? It's using Peace Walker to nuke, Mother Base, and then like showing that deterrence is necessary and that Peace Walker as a system is necessary so he can sell it to the United States or whatever, to the Soviets. And then he's double crossed by a Colombian professor who turns out to be a KGB agent, who then seizes him and basically decides to use the nuke to nuke Cuba. And so, but they said, but you're a Soviet. You're going to nuke your own allies, and it's like, we're going to do it and to make it look like America did it as a false flag attack, and then we won't even have to fight America. We won't have to nuke them because their reputation will crumble, and then there'll be a wave of communism that will ideologically spread throughout the world. So we won't even have to fight you. And so he's crazy. And then he gets double crossed again by the same guy, Hot Cold Man for the CIA, who basically, it's kind of stupid, but they arrest him, but he still has his like top secret laptop in his hand, and he puts on a secret code. And so what he does, his backup plan, is to send false information of fake incoming nukes to NORAD to make the Americans realize that they do need a real deterrence when they don't launch. But of course, as the nukes are coming in, the Americans are, of course, deciding we need to launch. And of course, the president and the vice president are out at a SALT II talk in the Soviet Union right now. And it goes to, like, you know, the chairman of the House. And I think it's really cool that in that same scene, you know, they patch through, and Huey hacks in and he patches Snake through, and he says, "This is Big Boss. You have to stand down. Those aren't real nukes." He's like, "How can I?" He's like, "Are you the director of like whatever?" He's like, "If you're the real Big Boss, you know, tell me something. Like, you were in that room, and I didn't shake so and so's hand, and I turned away." It's like, "Why did you do that?" "Because I had different ideals." And I just think it's so funny that they brought up the handshake as like that very iconic scene as the tell that he's the real guy that they can trust. And I think that was really cool. And that whole scene, you feel like the tension it's very emotional. Like the tension is there that they are planning to nuke. And even when the Speaker of the House or, you know, the House Congress guy or whatever is like, "We're not going to strike back. We don't know if this is real. I'm trusting Big Boss." The other people in the room take a gun to his head and threaten him like, "We are going to retaliate no matter what." At the, like, you know, and it's getting down to the 5 minute, they're at DEFCON 2 basically, and and so basically the only thing that's stopping us is to, you know, to destroy Peace Walker. And so even though you've destroyed it and you've done the battle, it's still sending the signal, and the only thing that can do it is that it can go into the ocean. And so the boss's AI, even though you disabled it, it reactivates and it makes Peace Walker stumble into the ocean, and it's kind of like this weird miracle thing where the boss's consciousness comes back alive again to save the world from its own destruction, and it goes into the water, short circuits, and the missiles on NORAD's radar disappear. So yeah, it's a super good story, a super good ending, and I felt like I really appreciated Metal Gear Solid 3 a lot more after I understood the boss's character, you know, Big Boss's, Snake's motivations, his character, what is Outer Heaven, what is, you know, deterrence, what is world peace. Like it was legitimately really, really well told and really well done. The rest of the game, though, I can't really say, you know, it's an amazing game. It's very serviceable, I would say. It does have quite a few boss fights, you know, tanks, APCs, a bunch of Metal Gear pod things, hover tanks, hovercrafts. They have little UFO things that you saw in 3. And there's this whole thing, oh, they're UFOs or they're hover technology. There's a little mini game where you crawl inside the AI pod and you pull up circuit boards and use that to build Metal Gear Zeke. So, which ties into, again, the overarching story where I believe Zeke was the Metal Gear in Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, and the first Metal Gear. So that would mean that if that's the real Big Boss, because I'm trying to remember, there's Big Boss who like got killed, but he wasn't really killed, and then he came back in Metal Gear 2. So I think one of those Big Bosses was actually Venom Snake, and this Snake is actually so Venom Snake might have actually died in Metal Gear 1. And they thought, oh, he came back to life in Metal Gear 2, but no, it was actually the real big boss. And then somehow he dies, but it's very like, he dies off screen or something. Um, and then the idea is, I guess, that, again, because you were building Zeke, that's the one from Metal Gear 2. I might have that mixed up, but either way, one of the big bosses is Venom Snake. Another one is the real, and he basically just, is wounded in the battle. He's like burned by some like fire or something, but he basically escapes. And so yeah, you build Metal Gear Zeke, you customize it. I really didn't finish building it because I didn't want to. Like once I beat the game, I did not want to do all the extra combat stuff. And again, that's what this kind of game is. It's also funny that I appreciate Kojima like making a kind of almost as full Metal Gear Solid experience as he could on the PSP, but like mobile gaming cannot be a story based medium because like you're playing, like the idea is that you're playing this on the subway. You're not sitting down and playing this in front of like a screen or something, because if that was the case, you would do a fully immersed musical like voice acting experience and you want to take it all in. And mobile games are not designed for that. Like you're playing it on the subway, so I'm like laughing to myself thinking at these emotional epic scenes of the boss and the revelation and all of this weird stuff that someone's like playing on the subway and like someone's trying to like, tell them to move or something, because it's super engrossing, right? And that's really not what it's supposed to be, but I appreciate that it is at least trying to be a more traditional cinematic experience. And I'm glad they ported it to PS3, because otherwise I would have never played it. I don't know who owns a PSP. You can play Nut outside. You can sneak outside. But yeah, the post-game content, there's basically just more side missions. And I never really liked this, honestly, that every time you did a main mission, it would unlock a side mission. And so I kind of felt compelled to do them. But they were just like, replay this one exact same level, but don't be seen, or blow up this thing. And so that's like, okay, that makes sense, because that's where it makes sense as a mobile game, because then it's just like, okay, I'm going to waste time. I'm going to, spend all these like meaningless hours building up my GMP, building up my base, getting all these guns and building Metal Gear Zeke. So there's a bunch of like time wasting, gameplay focused only things. And that's all the stuff they brought over from Metal Gear Solid 5. And that's what Metal Gear Solid 5, it feels like a big waste of time, honestly. Like when I think about Metal Gear Solid 5, you invest all this time and all this effort, and like it's only like Act 1, Act 2, and then Act 3 was like a multiplayer thing that never really happened, so it just doesn't exist. And similar in this game, like Chapter 5 is called Outer Heaven, which is like doing all the extra stuff. And so I think Act 2 and Metal Gear Solid 5, oh my god, I'm like 60 hours into this game, or like 50 hours in here. When is it going to end? Like how long is this bloody thing? And then you invest all that time, and it turns out, guess what? You're not even Big Boss. You're just some guy called Venom Snake. And it's just like, this is retarded. This is really, really dumb. And I think everyone was angry about it. Everyone was upset. And you had the little cutscene, and then like you scattered Diamond Dogs to the wind, and it makes sense though, like why they didn't get David Hayter, and like, but it just felt like. I mean, the other thing too is like none of the events of Metal Gear Solid 5 matter. They don't matter to the overall arching game. It's like, okay, you have a mother base in Africa. You have a different big boss who ends up taking the fall for the other Solid Snake mission where he takes them out. And unless was Venom Snake maybe the big boss for both those things, and the real big boss was totally unscathed, that's why it looks so good in 4. I don't know. I'm willing to suspend my belief that he had some kind of reconstructive surgery or something. Yeah, and it's also pretty much of a stretch. Like, okay, they have an AI in like 74. It's like, I mean, I guess. I mean, we're allowing a little bit of stretching of the technology to make it cool, I guess. But yeah, there's just a lot I can say about this game, and I'm gonna keep it at a minimum. I think we're already over an hour here, and Metal Gear reviews, like the games, are very long and in-depth and interesting, and again, the story gets really good. But so like, would I recommend this game? Honestly, no. I did not really enjoy playing this game, but if you are a fan slightly of the Metal Gear series, or specifically Metal Gear Solid 3, you really owe it to yourself to play this game simply because they fill in all this stuff missing. And specifically what I'm talking about, after you beat the game, you go to the briefing notes. And again, I know a lot of them, they go on so long, but there's the briefing notes at the very end where it's in like extra briefing notes or whatever, where it has the boss's message. And then there are just 4 tapes from Eva actually about the boss. And they are super, super interesting. And they totally contextualize her character. It's not like they're recontextualizing, they're adding the context that just wasn't there. And I just cannot stress how important that was to me and how much it made me appreciate Metal Gear Solid 3 a lot more. But yeah, aside from that, I'm definitely more scared of nukes now. Very scary stuff. And yeah, being an individual despite the government and the politics and the stuff on the side, and creating a world not only of peace, but a world of individuals that are not going to be used for war and struggle that they don't benefit from. And yeah, the gameplay was okay. So yeah, good assortment of guns. Again, a lot of repetitive, segments and side missions, but overall, the story was kind of worth it. But yeah, I think that's all I got to say on Peace Walker. Also, one thing I just actually forgot, the 2 things that were really funny about this game is that this is the Miku Metal Gear game and the Assassin's Creed Metal Gear game. So 2 really funny Easter eggs in this game were that the voice they used for the AI pods that were also singing in this game were, Hatsune Miku, and it's very distinct, her voice, right? So when you hear it, you're like, oh, that's Miku. And so yeah, they put Miku in Metal Gear, and so there's a funny little crossover there. And so the Peace Walker AI mech, it'll just sing la 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 la, and then it also sings this small song in Miku's voice at the end of the game when it goes into the ocean. The Assassin's Creed thing is that in one of the levels, and I just found this by accident, I had no idea it was there, but it kind of shows, I guess the culture at the time was made in 2012, but it's off by quite a few years. But you sneak on this rooftop with Snake, and there's this hay, and there's this haystack down below, and you press the action button, and you full on does an Assassin's Creed style leap of faith, complete with sound effects and everything. And if you land in that sack of hay, you actually get the Assassin's cardboard box. And actually, it's really fun and really cool, because whenever a NPC approaches the box, as long as no one is looking, you can actually pull them into the box and knock them out. And it feels really, really good and really kind of cheap, frankly. But yeah, no, I love that. I think it was a really nice nod, but also felt at the same time extremely random. Like, okay, there is, there's a full-on Assassin's Creed reference in this game. I just was not expecting that. I also was not expecting for the AI to be voiced by Miku. That was just kind of like, oh, okay, that's something. But yeah, 2 things I definitely wanted to mention that are in this game that really made me smile, I guess. Anyway, guys, that's it. See you later. Bye.